Welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host here. And my guest today is a host of another YouTube channel called Pairs Well with Knitting. Hi, Jan.
Hi, Ria. How are you?
How does it feel to be on another YouTube channel?
It's my first time. It's pretty exciting, I have to say.
I'll
I'm
be
in bright colors for a bright interview.
I'll be very gentle, I promise. So
I
we
appreciate it.
we actually have met in Toronto in your hometown, and we spent the beautiful night at Unit Toronto. And if you guys are ever in Toronto, I cannot highly recommend it enough to visit this store. It's a beautiful store. They have gorgeous selection of fabrics, of yarns, and just the beautiful community that they organized there. So you were one of the guests at the Knit Night, and you were sitting right next to me, and we immediately struck the conversation, and it was like very easy sort of camaraderie. Because we love the same thing. We love knitting and love YouTube. So like how difficult could it be, right? So I started watching your YouTube channel. I went all the way back to the first episode, and you were sitting on the chair against the wall, looking lonely. Tell me, like, what was going through your mind when you decided to start a YouTube channel?
You're funny on all this. So I've been knitting for almost 4 years now and have absorbed the goodness of all the knitting podcasts. And I think this is where a lot of the inspiration comes from. This is where the beginning for me of the knitting community stemmed from, because this was in periods of lockdown, which we won't get into. And so this was a connection I had, even virtually, with, no response back, of someone on the other side of the screen sharing about their passion of knitting.
Mm.
And for me, I knew I had wanted to get into this myself. I love chatting, I love sharing, I love building community. And it was something that for the last year, for sure, I had really wanted to do. I didn't really know where I was going to go and navigate this, what my true objective would be. And yeah, my year sabbatical was coming up, and it was like a bit of a time crunch, and I'm always very good with the time crunch. And so June was approaching. This was the last teaching month that I had before an entire year off, which I was thrilled about and still am because I'm enjoying. And yeah, I thought I'm just going to do it. So it was like all that excitement and energy got put into the packing the day before to venture off for, I think it was like 5 weeks we were gone for out of the house and doing a big road trip. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to film before we leave so that there's some kind of reference to introduce the trip, because I wanted to pair knitting and traveling together, which I knew I'd be doing a lot of this year. And that's what we did. So I literally had my suitcase with all of my wares beside me. I had thrown on my cotton ranunculus because it was a hot day in June, and I filmed. And it was the setup was super novice. I didn't have any tech, obviously. I had my phone, and I recorded with my iPhone. And that was the beginning of Pairs Well with knitting.
When you teach in person, you talk to the live audience. So you have people in front of you to whom you're giving your lecture. When you in front of that camera, who do you talk to?
Everyone. I feel like I've instructed small groups with special education to the entire school of hundreds of children, adults, parents coming in. And I feel I'm used to talking with people, of course, and making connections. But then, I mean, lecture style. I work with little people, so we don't really lecture per se. But yeah, I feel like this style of sharing it's uninterrupted. And so for that, it's very different from being in person with somebody. But as well as I'm sure you know as well from podcasting, it's funny not to get immediate feedback. I feel like I'm very good at reading nonverbal cues in people with their facial gestures, their responses, their bodies in general. And there's nothing like it's me on the screen. And so I think even with the first episode, it was this funny thing of not knowing how people would absorb this. How would they take the information? Would they enjoy what I was sharing or not? And how can I improve? And we're just, I think, it's gonna take a lifetime of navigation of this. And
Well,
and I think, yeah, I was just gonna finish with, I think the way that I receive the feedback is through views when the videos, they have a certain count of how many people have watched, the likes to see who's enjoying it, if they've so chosen to click on the like, and then the comments from the community. But I feel the people, as I'm sure again, the knitting community is just so wonderful and warm and accepting and positive and, the best enablers. And so I feel like that's where I'm receiving that feedback from.
mean, to me, it's like this is the sword with two edges. Because on one hand, yes, it feels wonderful to get those likes and comments and the numbers of views. On the other hand, it puts you into that sort of like, why didn't this video receive likes? What did I do wrong? Like you start judging yourself based on the reaction. And it's sort of like it's hard mentally to deal with it sometimes because you don't know if like people just not interested in you, if you should quit altogether, like maybe you don't have anything to say and share with the audience, maybe YouTube hates you, right? So you're questioning everything. How do you deal with like the uncertainty of the video that doesn't get like the regular views or doesn't get the reaction that you hope for?
Uh, yeah, I appreciate the question, I think. And I think a lot of people can resonate with those feelings as well. I know for me, I try not to be driven by the numbers per se. It's more the quality versus quantity kind of thing. Maybe it's because I'm still new. Or maybe it's the world that I've built up for myself with my career and my personal life, where it's like a lesson. Sometimes you can plan out the wazoo for like a great lesson. It's really interactive. You're looking at, and I won't go into teaching pedagogy, but like you're looking at all your learners in the room and it can bomb. You've put it all the time and it bombs because of, again, that feedback that you're receiving from the little ones where it wasn't engaging for them. They weren't successful. They didn't feel successful. The attention span wasn't there, whatever. It could be a million things. And other times, you kind of navigate freely and it's that whole learning experience, more flying by the seat of your pants, a 5-step learning, if you will, where it's 5 steps into the classroom and you're planning on, okay, how can I reconfigure this? How can I teach this? And sometimes those are the absolute best lessons. And so I feel like with this way as well, with the feedback that we receive, or I'll speak for myself that I do with having the channel, it's a good, I guess, starting point, if you will. And I mean, data doesn't lie. It's a measurement for sure. And if you've been watching the videos, I'm heavily into data and analysis as well. But I think this is it. I think sometimes some things do work. And of course, we want to continue that success level. And sometimes things don't do well. But I think that's life. Like we cannot be highly successful every single day. It would be lovely if we could try, but I don't know if that's, a human trait that we can all possess. And so I don't know. I feel good in what I'm putting out there. I feel happy with what I'm putting out there. And I feel like, with where I was, which was, I hadn't even started this, 6 months ago. We're coming up to the 6-month mark at the end of January. I'm feeling so happy and thankful for where I am right now.
I watched your last episode and it was very analytical. You basically like went over everything that you've done in 23, what you enjoyed, what you haven't enjoyed, what you can improve on, what you achieved that was like really great. And you guys have to go and watch it for yourself. Do you approach life like this in general? Do you analyze yourself every January and think like, okay, this was great and I'm going to continue with that, but now I have to do swatching before I pick the pattern? And I want to talk about that because that's a very interesting concept to me. Like,
I'm already sweating. As soon as you said watching, I'm like, oh man. Um, yeah, no, okay. First, I think it's almost the question of like, what kind of person are you? And so for me, I do have that personality trait coupled with my lifestyle choices that I am a very reflective person. I'm reflective of not only of myself, but of everyone around me. And I'm constantly, I think, mulling over my mind what is done well in general and how can we improve. And this isn't only for myself. I think it's because I work with so many other individuals that I'm always thinking how can we improve, but then as well like what we're doing well at kind of that middle mark, if you will. How can we improve that even more? So coming up with how can we find success and be even more successful. I think this is definitely going on with my knitting journey. And I mean, I think this is what is just brilliant about podcasting is that I feel like it allows me to be hyper focused in that moment or leading up to thinking about what I'm going to shoot for my episode, and allows me to refine that practice even more. And I'm sure, as you know, because we both do this, we both love it, is that it allows us to reflect not only maybe in the full big picture process, because that's something that I feel like I've really really dug into my last video with analyzing everything from last year and the issues that I had, but the things that I loved. And I feel that it just, yeah, it's pinpointed out for me with that reflection of what I can do even to make one thing better. So even if it's in like one piece, like when you're chatting about a sweater that you've just finished or that you're working on as a work in progress, because you're verbally now sharing and kinesthetically going over, like you're touching and showing your piece. I think for me, it's that hyper focus again of like, oh yeah, I could have made the sleeves a little longer. Wouldn't that look better? Or like thinking about specifics of like my champagne cardigan. It's like staring at me right now and I'm knitting the sleeve again. That you're physically seeing it on camera. You can rewatch it as many times as you want. And looking at that sleeve and thinking, that is some ginormous sleeve. It doesn't balance with the body. What can I do? But I think for me, that big theme, as well, is like, let's have garments that fit. And I want to make garments that fit better because my process was not perfect. Um, it's the joy. I definitely like, I feel such a spark of joy with this passion that I have, that I do in my free time. And I want to continue that joy because it it's so this is my own time that I'm doing these things and I'm producing these things. It offers the freedom, the creativity, building the community. It's amazing. And I feel like, while the iron is hot, and this is something that I can continue to like for where the fourth year in a row where, it's obsessive knitting. Let's do that. Let's continue on with the happiness.
well, one thing that you and I also have in common is that we relatively recent knitters, right? Like you knitting 4 years. I just started to knit like 6 years ago. And I often joke, but it's only joke by half, that I feel like I wasted so many years of my life not knitting. Do you feel the same way? Do you feel like now, because you entered into this field as an adult, you treat it a little bit less as just pastime and hobby and more as the learning opportunity, and you pushing yourself harder just because you started it as an adult?
I don't, but I think it's because I'm kind of that continuous child that refuses to grow up. And so I do get into new things. And for me, they're not always long term. I'll go really heavy down one path and try to experience everything I can in that thing. And sometimes I continue it, sometimes I don't. So, for example, years before I got into knitting, I got really onto that, making my own things train. It wasn't clothing, it was products. So it was different elements of like beauty care and soaps and cleansers and toners and moisturizers that I mean I could go on. My lip balm was amazing. And creating all these from scratch at home in our little condo, in the kitchen, and going through that research of what kind of ingredients can I use? What do these ingredients do together? Is this the best option? And I loved it. I still admire people that do it. I have fallen off the wayside with that, and I've gone in a different direction. We're now using, a variety of purchase products, but I feel like I am someone that loves to try new things. Some stick, some don't, but I feel like that's human. We're human because we want to try new things, because we want to grow, we want to explore. And I feel like I do. And so this is a journey that I feel like for me, I've been on a bit. And I continue to see myself doing this for, if not forever, for a very long time because I get so much greatness out of it.
Well, yesterday I went to a knit night in my local yarn store, and somehow the conversation to gauging, and I told the story, I shared the story that like taught me the importance of gauging. So it was my second or third project. I didn't know anything about gauge at that time. And I went to one of the like Michael's or some big box store. I bought some nice acrylic yarn. I bought some like long pair of circular needles, and I cast it on a blanket. I cast it on what seemed like a reasonable amount of stitches, and I started eating it. After a month, I thought it looks like a good size. It was bunched up on the needles, so I looked and it was like decent size blanket. So I thought like, okay, time to cast off. I casted it off, and it turned out that what I thought was the length of the blanket turned to be the width of the blanket, and all that bunch up fabric on my needles became 12 feet of a blanket in length. And so like all three of my children could like easily wrap themselves in that blanket.
It's a nice little collaboration of family.
What's your relationship with gauge? Like what do you try to get out of the gauge? How did that came to you? Like how did you become friends with gauging? And now you have this whole philosophy of like, I'm gonna gauge the yarn before I even choose the project for it. Like what was that progression for you?
Okay, this is going to be dramatic for everybody. I feel like we all need a cocktail at this point. I we know as knitters, we've known as new knitters, we were told from even the interwebs, or with if you were lucky enough to have a physical community of knitters around you, you need to gauge swatch. That's like number one in knitting world, making a swatch, doing this little like beautiful square of a sample, and then do all the measurements, yada yada. I feel like I have gauge swatched, but for me, because I have such a core value of creativity and freedom, that even if I gauge swatched up until, days ago, it wouldn't drive me away from pairing it with a pattern that I envisioned with that yarn. So the gauge might totally be off. And if you've watched if you've watched my episodes, there's a lot of recalculation, frogging back. And it's so I think perhaps the assumption of friends with gauge, we're not friends yet. We are acquaintances that one day shall become friends. I have high hopes for us, but I think, yeah, it's a process, and I feel like I've been reluctant to. I think looking at gauge and pairing it with a pattern because like I feel like it limits or can limit my creativity or my pattern choices, which for me, this is the one element of my life that I feel like I really want to have the ownership and, full on authority of saying, no, I'm gonna put this magical yarn with this fabulous pattern. Even if it doesn't work, I'll make it work. And I feel pretty, mathematician about it. But this year's the year that I'm definitely, I feel like I've re looked at everything. I'm reversing the engineering process for myself of my garment making process, where my intention is gauge swatching. So preparing that gauge and actually having it more so than in the past, allow me to pair a pattern that fits better. And last night, if I may go on, I went on to Ravelry because obviously I'm like, okay, I have to abide by my own word. I have to start this gauge swatch business. So I've got some yarn that I'm ready to swatch. And I thought, okay, I have to set myself up for success. Bite-sized pieces, what am I going to do? I went on to Ravelry, and I'm sure we all are all well versed in that website. But here's what I just found out last night, tidbit of info perhaps for all of us, is that if you go into the filters, there's not only a yarn weight filter, but there is a gauge filter if you continue to the very like bottom area on the what is this side, the left side. It game changer, game changer, because you can put in your gauge. So say like, 20 stitches per 10 centimeters, and it spits out patterns
I
that you
didn't
can
know.
use with that specific gauge.
Yeah.
Mind blown,
Who
mind blown.
who knew?
Who knew? I feel
That's why I
like this,
love Fiberchats. I feel like every guest that comes to my channel teaches me some like new bit of information that like I had no idea.
but this is again, for me, this is such a piece of community. So if it's knitting community, running community, like whatever, we're all feeding off of each other in a really positive way and learning from each other or learning from our mistakes.
Or from other mistakes. Well, talking of running, it's contradictory hobbies, right? Because you've been a runner for a while now. Since I think you started in high school, from what I've heard on your channel.
You are
I've
a
been
very
watching,
good
I know.
listener.
And like when I'm thinking of people who run, like I'm thinking it's like it's such a physically active thing. And this year you're planning to run 15 kilometers versus the 10 that you normally run. It's just like, I mean, honestly, high respect to you, mind blown. My hat is off, right?
We can all do it.
But then I'm thinking like when you think about knitters, it's something like very you sit in the chair, rocking chair, not moving much. Do you feel like they're contradictory hobbies for you, or do you think they complementary hobbies?
I okay. There's a lot going on in all of your content you just shared and of questions. So we'll touch on that last portion of complementary hobbies. I think the similar thread is the autonomous piece, is that running is usually quite individual and knitting is as well. You're usually doing it solo. So I think that's kind of the common thread. And it surprises me that there are not more knitters and runners together in one. I feel like I have met other knitters that run, and so we have a common bond. They're like, oh my gosh, you run too, like share about that. So that's always really exciting. But yeah, so I think that's kind of that common thread, is that we're driven individually. Myself as well, I love people. I'm a big people person. I consider myself an extrovert. That is contradictory, I think, for knitters in general. Not everyone, of course, we're not in a box, but I think I prefer to be around people. And so even, coming home with the love of my life isn't here, oftentimes I find myself grabbing my knitting if I've already come in and he's not here, and I'll head out to a cafe to sit and knit and just even be around other people, which might be funny for, other knitters that prefer to like stay in and be calm. I do too. The other component you were talking about is basically like moving your body and sweating and then sitting down for long periods of time. So I'm an 80s child, and we did not have the same schooling and special education that we do today. Um, I wonder if we went back into my younger years of being a student, if today there would have been things noted about um, challenging things that I may have had. I was taught to sit for sure and mind our manners, all these things. That was, we had very strict parenting growing up. Um, but I wasn't very good at it. I was always squirming around. I'm finding even sitting here and often on my podcast too, I'm often like moving my hands a lot. Um, I'm a mover and a shaker. And so for me, the sweating piece, the running, I do a lot of kettlebell workouts, strength training, almost every day. I love it. I love feeling pushing my body in different ways. And knitting is that part of movement where it busies my mind, but it busies my hands as well. So I think the one like mini micro story I can share is that before knitting, I could not sit down for the duration of a movie and watch the movie. It seemed impossible to me. I would get up if it was home, I'd go to the washroom, I'd put on some laundry. Now I can sit through an entire movie as long as I have my knitting, which I always do, and I can busy my hands and my brain and still have, you know, watch and absorb the story that's being shared. But yeah, I think it's busy body, busy mind for me is a massive win.
It's funny because I was just recently visiting my parents in Florida and I was sitting by the poolside and knitting. And this guy came to me, it's like, oh, you're knitting. I would never have patience to do that. And I was laughing because I consider myself a very impatient person, but I feel like knitting gives me patience, you know?
I totally hear that. I feel like in that way we're very similar, and I feel the same way, very much so.
What, like when you go to this cafe to knit, like, do you have any interesting communications with other people? Like, the people is it like immediate conversation started, the fact that you knit in public?
Well, Toronto is a unique spot, and I live right downtown. So I am a senior here in the downtown core. Most people are pretty much half my age that I'm sitting around. Um, so I mean, I'm that person because again, I want to chat with other people. I'll chat with people online or beside me at the table. And some people a little more reluctant to communicate with you. But then sometimes it's really surprising, and you'll have people that'll comment or ask questions. So there was a couple days ago, I was at a cafe right down the road, and I was editing one of the videos and knitting on the side. So I'm editing and knitting at the same time and drinking coffee, which is like, three things going on, but that's normal for me. And the girl next door comments, she's like, "Oh, you're doing a lot right now." And I said, "Well, it's pretty normal." But then this is the thing that like got my heart. She's like, "My goodness, I love your outfit. What are you wearing?" And I'm like, "Oh, here we go." So of course I get to share everything. And yeah, some people are really interested, I think, first in making connection with another human, and then as well that what you're doing, what your passion is, that knitting piece. I do find ironically traveling outside of the city, and I hope this isn't looked at as negative, but is that I find people approach me more. So they'll either comment on what I'm wearing more, or if I am knitting in public, that'll get commented on. And I love it because it's a great little conversation starter.
Talking of what are you wearing? What are you wearing?
Oh, we needed something bright because we had yet another gray day in the city of Toronto. So this is a really bright sweater number 12, I believe. 12. This is from my favorite things knitwear, and it's one strand of knitting for olive merino wool with one strand of their equivalent soft silk mohair in Hackiato, which is just a fun bright orange.
Well, I want to talk to you about it. So you mentioned in one of your like again, like I've been watching you, right? You saw those views going up. That's all me, right? So you mentioned your love of oranges and the orange hue basically and how you're attracted to that. You also mentioned that for 2024, your plan is to become more mindful of what yarn you buy and like, and then finding the right project for that yarn and not buying for specific project necessarily. How disciplined in general you are about yarn buying, because you mentioned also that you live in an apartment, so storage probably is somewhat of an issue. And how did you change from like the beginning, right? From the start, like did you become a yarn snob?
I always love that you tier the questions. It's so good. Okay. Yes, so we do live in a condo downtown, and so I joke, and I always say, to the love of my life, if I'm calling out, I'm like, are you in the south wing, the north wing? Where are you? It's never hard to find, anyone in here. The yarn stash has grown over the 4 years, and yeah, we're tight. We're tight. But I figure there's always room for yarn. We just kind of squish it down and squish it more into the containers that I have. But I know I'll use it at one point. So we're good. And yeah, I think yarn snobbiness. I mean, I think it depends what the definition of the yarn snob would be. Is it someone that, is buying really expensive or, really unique types of fibers? I don't know. Is it someone that is, I don't know, going for like a specific hard, like difficult to obtain yarn? I don't know. Yarn snob. I think my choices and taste of yarn I can speak to where I can talk about in the beginning I didn't really understand the thicknesses or weights of yarn. Now I have a much like that I'm good with. That I get. I'm like, okay, lace, fingering, DK, like we're good on that. So my sweet spot I find is worsted and DK are my favorite go-tos for yarn weights. For like fiber content, I had a video that was my 2023 makes. It was the part one with all the garments. And again, I really critically analyzed, I think, my making of 2023. And I really thought that before I looked at the data, that I was a rustic girl through and through, that I loved, a hardy yarn, with a tight spin, heavy, which I do, I love. But when I looked at my data, because I punched in a spreadsheet what I actually knit with, so I classified between like basically soft fibers and rustic fibers. I did plant fibers as well, but that's maybe a separate portion. And not the majority of the time. I think it was like maybe, I don't know, 50% of my knitting for 2023 in general, this is including garments, gifts, and accessories, was rustic. So half the time, and pretty much the other half of the time almost was what I would classify as like soft yarn. That was interesting for me. So yeah, the yarn that I'm liking, I think is the yarn that calls out to me first at the time where I was saying in my last video that the yarn speaks to me, and it does. It's something that with color, with texture, with feel, I'm falling in love. But also where I can picture it. I feel like my brain really works with, envisioning, or I can apply that yarn or fabric or whatever to a sweater. And so when I feel like I can picture it into something, that's where I get excited. And then that's when my yarn purchases happen.
Well, you mentioned like your analytical approach to previous needs, right? That you like spreadsheet and all of these things. When you go to Ravelry, like what's your queue looks like? Plan that you for your future projects?
She is a chunky one. That's for sure. I've got, I mean, I've started once I started knitting. And just to even touch on that, when I first started knitting, I thought I don't need a pattern. For a year, I didn't buy a knitting pattern. I was like, I can do this. I can engineer this. Like I can design my own thing. And I did. And then I real part of it was also because I didn't know how to read a pattern or using the different symbols or chart. Like that to me seemed overwhelming. I just wanted to get in there, like get down and dirty with the yarn. And I did. Um, Once I started coming to terms with, okay, we're going to start exploring the pattern. We're going to start to learn how to read a chart. That's when Ravelry started for me, where I would start to get inspiration. I would start to queue up or favorite patterns. And so I haven't analyzed that yet. I haven't put it into a spreadsheet yet, but I shall maybe. I mean, I've got everything there that I feel like would be really like practical garments that one day would be great to have on my wardrobe. I've got some real like heavy hitters that would be a dream knit of like different table work sweaters, color work, because to me these are much more labors of love. And I don't know if I'll knit everything in my queue, but they bring me pleasure even to scroll through and look at. And then kind of offer as well that jumping off point of sweater intention or garment intention.
Okay. Well, you mentioned that you took a class recently for the knitting for the first time, and the Unit Toronto is coming soon in May. Are you planning to take more classes? Like, do you see more classes in your future?
I definitely see more classes in my future, like you mentioned, and you are so knowing. You've done all the dabbling. Um, I really loved the class, and the class I took was an introduction to brioche with Kate Atherley in Toronto. She was teaching at Yarns Untangled in Kensington Market, and I knew about Kate from Instagram and knitting community, but I'd never met her. And I just, for me, it again, being that person that needs people, class was the best thing because I was able to be with other knitters, having all the chats, making all the little fun connections, and having a guru like Kate walk around, help out, guide and instruct. And then, if you're going down the rabbit hole of mistake, there's somebody there that can help you get out of that mistake or help you problem solve the mistake. I mean, I've never had that. I don't come from, an existing community of knitters or, a family that taught me or this was amazing. So for that reason, as well as the practical reason of like improving my knitting or learning a new skill or technique, but again, that people connection, amazing, amazing with a class. So fast forwarding to Knit City, the tickets went on sale a couple days ago. Now you'll see weeks ago. And I will be going to Knit City, which I'm really excited about. But sadly, my two first choice classes were sold out within the hour. I was taking my mother to an appointment. And so I was trying to, like, between the appointment and the waiting room, click into the classes to see what I could get my hands on. So I have not signed up for class yet, but I'm on a wait list just in case. But I'm really excited to attend. Are you coming?
I'm hope. I don't know quite yet, and I have to update my passport because it was like on that expiration time last time I came to Toronto. So like,
Okay. Well, get on it.
yeah, it's coming up. I mean, what's your dream class? Like, is there some technique or something that you dying to learn in knitting?
it goes with one of the classes is sold out actually in Knit City, which I would love to take something like this one day, and I know I will, is a stranded colorwork class. I feel like my colorwork skills, I love the product of colorwork. I think it is just stunning. Um, the pleasure that I get out of it when producing colorwork is not super pleasurable for me. Um, there's times that I tried to like, fib to myself and say like, yeah, I'm getting into this. I like it. I'm getting really, I'm feeling satisfied with this. It's always a bit of a struggle. And so I feel like I've tried to manage different techniques. I'm holding yarn in different ways. I'm doing the two-stranded on the one knuckle. Sometimes I'm trying to knit with both hands. Nothing so far for me has super resonated as a super joyous production of knitting. My favorite, I think, technique that I've done so far, and it quite deviates from the stranded, was the mosaic knitting with slip stitches. So I had finished my Pressed Flowers pullover by Amy Christoffers, and that is an all over color work. And that's a labor of love because you're basically knitting like two rows to get one. But I think the easiness of it for me, that maybe sounds wrong, but the simplicity of working only with one color or one like thread of yarn at a time for each row allowed me to feel successful and really happy with the product.
Well, you want me to tell you my class of dreams that I want to take?
Oh my gosh,
And
yes, 100%.
I almost had a private class. Well, it wasn't. I was a witness to a private class at Rhinebeck where Mary Martin was teaching somebody how to do fission and fusion knitting. And I would really love to take that class. It looks so fun.
That's awesome. So what is the fusion? Is it a combo of two different knitting styles?
It's basically you marling, and so you use two strands of yarn at any time, and you pick one or another. It's sort of like mosaic knitting because you use one of the yarns and then you knit with two colors. It sounds complicated. It's actually like very doable, but the result of it is that you get both sides of the knitting get separate designs. Sometimes they're the same design, sometimes they're different designs. So it's like really amazing to watch like grow in front of your eyes. So I would love to take that.
That sounds awesome. Is it almost like double knitting?
It's almost like double knitting, except
Yeah.
yeah, it's except you like marling also half of the time. So like that's the difference.
Cool.
It's
That's
very
awesome. I hope you get to take that one day.
yeah, like if I'm coming to Toronto, like I want to get into that class for sure.
Let's all take the
I mean,
class,
you
please.
guys are very lucky with the fiber talent in Toronto. You have Kate Utterly, you have Mary Martin, you have so many very talented designers and teachers there.
We do. I think this is it. We're up in the Great White North, and Canadiana, I think there is that thread, if you will, of knitters. It's definitely a smaller community. It's not, in my eyes, in my experience, it's definitely not, the leading passion for everyone here. But I think the people that do it are very passionate about it. I think there are a lot of leaders as well that we are so lucky that they're right here. I mean, it's pretty nice that we have all that. I think as well as access to yarns and fibers. I mean, we can get our hands, I think, almost on anything in the
Right.
city. And I mean, especially because after, pandemic-y bits, we can get online purchases from all over the world to wherever we live now, which is also amazing in that way. But I feel privileged that I'm able to go to a shop, and we have fabulous shops here, and touch and feel and see and smell in person, which is amazing.
No, I really enjoyed my visit to Toronto. I loved that store. Like Unit Toronto was amazing. Claudia is
So
amazing
lovely.
host. It was like really
So good.
great to be a part of it, and to meet you there.
I agree. I had such a nice time that evening, and it was such a pleasure meeting you. I love that, I came a little later to the knit night, and it was two tables of wonderful knitters, and just the whole night doing the little gabby gabs about the knit. It's lovely.
Well, I hope I'm gonna get to see you in May. I'm like aiming for coming to Knit City, Toronto. So fingers crossed it's all gonna work out. And I
100% get your passport sorted and come on up.
yeah, I'm working on it. And thank you for being a guest of my channel. Thank you for agreeing to this experiment, where
This
you
is
want somebody
absolutely my
else's.
pleasure. Thank you. I hope you will come on to my channel one day too.
I'd love that. I'd love that.
I love it. Oh, amazing.
Thanks so much. I'll see you hopefully in Toronto. If not there, we'll meet on some other festival.
I love it. Thank you so much for today. Enjoyed all the chat about the fibery goodness in our community.
Thank you.